I think that if anyone believes the demonstrations are going to stop, this is someone who is incorrect. A lot of activists have said for a number of years that what is needed to right or make right what is wrong in this country where it concerns equal justice, equal protection under the law, equal economic and educational opportunities, equal opportunities to make a goddamn living that has been denied people of color, African Americans, for so long, since forever, since for 400 years, that eventually a tipping point would be reached, people would take to the streets and would stay in the streets until this madness stopped. And I think anyone who thinks it's just the demonstrations are going to stop, you're kidding yourselves. I don't think they dare stop, not now, because there's so much more at issue now. Not to minimize Black Lives Matter, not to minimize 400 years of treating our fellow human beings like shit, not to minimize that at all. But there are other issues now who have been incorporated into the Black Lives Matter movement, into the movement to stop white cops from brutalizing and killing African Americans for no reason, just because they could. And as far as the racists, I think it was on Saturday or Sunday, I shared with you some articles from rightwingwatch.org, which is part of People for the American Way, broadcasts, webcasts put out there by neo-Nazi crazy son of a bitches who claim to be Christian. In spite of those people, I mean, fuck those people. Those people are going to be smashed like bugs under our feet. Eventually they will. They will be smashed. They will be squashed on the pavement. I'm talking about the greater needs, necessities of this society. We must come together as a people. We must. And I've said before that I think the younger generation is going to help this happen, but it takes more than the younger generation. Christ, it takes people all the way up to my age. It has to happen. There has to be a dissolving of this race horseshit that white people have perpetrated against black people in this country since forever. It must stop. And all the attendant issues now that have been incorporated into this, the economic injustice, the failures of this predatory, vicious, violent capitalism, the imperialism of the U.S. military in foreign countries, the use of that military by the capitalists who don't give a fuck who lives or who dies as long as they get the money. Give me the money. Give me the resources. Destroy the Brazilian Amazon. Destroy everything. Rip everything up. Just convert it into money. It's got to stop. And finally, we see hundreds of thousands, if not at this point, millions of people in the streets in the United States. And if you've been paying attention, it's not just here. While there is a strong move globally and here to put fascism in control, there's also a strong move to deny fascism, to deny militarism, to deny the operation of a vicious, violent law enforcement operation. Whether it's people being clubbed to death in Hong Kong or a 15-year-old girl beheaded in Iran, 14-year-old girl, I think. It was in the New York Times today, Sunday. Read it. Her father beheaded her while she was asleep. This shit's got to stop. And I think people around the globe are realizing that the tipping point has been reached. I don't know if we have enough time. I really don't. To bring this madness to an end before we are confronted with the global destruction of global warming. Global warming, anthropogenic climate disruption. It has to be met with the full cooperation of people around the world, the scientific community, the economic community, the educational community, and yes, the religious community. Everybody has got to confront this issue. But anyway, here we are. What happens next is anybody's guess, but I want to share with you Bret Stephens writing in the New York Times. It was in Sunday's paper. He mentions that he taught a seminar via Zoom, of course. Bret Stephens, who's an opinion columnist with the New York Times, he taught a seminar at the University of Chicago this spring on the art of political persuasion. Such a thing used to exist, it really did. And he said that he had his students read Lincoln, Pericles, King, Orwell, Havel, Churchill, among other practitioners of the art of political persuasion. And he said that he ended the class or the seminar with a study of Donald Trump's tweets. And that was part of a class on demagogy, on the madness that erupts from a wannabe dictator's mouth. And Bret Stephens says if the closing subject was depressing, Donald Trump's tweets, he says at least the timing was appropriate. And then Stephens goes on to write this: we are in the midst of an unprecedented national catastrophe. The catastrophe is not the pandemic, or an economic depression, or killer cops, or looted cities, or racial iniquities. These are all too precedented. What's unprecedented is that never before have we been led by a man who so completely inverts the spirit of Lincoln's second inaugural address. That was the one where he said, with malice toward none, charity for all. And as Bret writes, with malice toward all, with charity for none. 8 words that encapsulates everything this president is, does, and stands for. Now, I've not spent a lot of the time in my life either being educated in a formal setting or the autodidactic way that most of my education has come. I haven't spent a lot of time reading great political speeches and writings. I just haven't. I don't know why. But Bret Stephens says, what do you learn from reading great political speeches and writings? And he answers his own question. He writes, what you learn is that well-chosen words are the way by which past deeds acquire meaning and future deeds acquire purpose. And he says the only false notes in the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, the only false notes were these, quote, the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, end quote. Right. And the Battle of Gettysburg, as Stephens points out, is etched in national memory less for its military significance, because it was an abattoir, it was a slaughterhouse, than because Lincoln reinvented the goals of the Civil War in that speech. And in doing so, he reimagined the possibilities of America, originally imagined by the framers, who could not live by the very words that they put into our founding documents. They couldn't do it. But the documents remain. Stephens writes, political writing doesn't just provide meaning and purpose, it also provides determination, hope, and instruction. In the book, The Power of the Powerless, which was written at one of the grimmer moments of communist tyranny, Václav Havel laid out why the system was so much weaker, communism, and the individual so much stronger than either the tyrants or the people knew. Winston Churchill, in his speech that was titled Fight on the Beaches after Dunkirk, he told his people, the Britons, of, quote, a victory inside this deliverance, end quote. And to Churchill, that was a reason, even though it was remote at the time, for optimism and a resolve on the part of the British people that they would prevail. And then Dr. King, in Letter from Birmingham Jail, Dr. King explained why patience was no answer to injustice. King wrote this, quote, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, brutalize, and even kill your black brothers and sisters with impunity, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait, end quote. When was that written? 60 years ago? And Stephen says, in a word, great political writing aims to elevate, to raise us up, to wake us up, to get our fucking eyes off of paying our bills, or who moved in down the street, or what's happening on the latest TV program. Elevate, elevate. So, Brett Stevens says, okay, what by contrast then does one learn by studying Trump's utterances? And then let me quote what he says. The purpose of Trump's presidency is to debase. First, by debasing the currency of speech. It's why he refuses to hire reasonably competent speechwriters to craft reasonably competent speeches. It's why his communications team has been filled by people like Dan Scavino and Stephanie Grisham and Sarah Sanders. And it's why Twitter is his preferred medium of communication. It is speech designed for provocations and put-downs, for making supporters feel smug, for making opponents seethe, for reducing national discourse to the level of grunts and counter-grunts. That's the level that suits Trump because it's the level at which he excels. Anyone who studies Trump's tweets carefully must come away impressed by the way he has mastered the demagogic arts. He doesn't lead his base, as most politicians do. He personifies it. He speaks to his followers as if he were them. He cultivates their resentments, demonizes their opponents, validates their hatreds. He glorifies himself so that they may bask in the reflection. Whatever this has achieved for him or them, it's a calamity for us. Hey, Truth Seekers, Mike Malloy here. While you're sheltering in place and practicing safe social behavior, probably catching up on the Malloy cast, remember, we have a new weekly program just for our patron supporters. There are other thank you gifts for your support. Remember, visit MikeMalloy.com and click on the big patron link on the main page. You can't miss it, and we can't do without you.